how big of a key leadership was for this team. And, we talked about practice being closed and stuff last year. Man, I heard some awful things come out of practice, stuff that didn't really get reported on. But I heard about times where players were telling coaches like, no, I'm not doing that. Times where coaches would tell players like, they're big on like, if you mess up on a rep, you go back to the front of the line and you do that rep again. Big time players, like guys that have transferred out, thankfully, but big time players, big time names were saying like, throwing their hands up and saying like, nah, I ain't doing that. I ain't going back to the front of the line. I ain't doing this. I just heard some from people that were there, right? People that have no agenda, have no reason to lie. Like there was a bad, and maybe that's again why practice is closed a little bit because Coach Norvell didn't want that kind of stuff being seen again. And obviously you'd hope that stuff's not even happening, not just not being seen. But he talked about how big of a key leadership was. And he talked about for all the guys they brought in, that was one of the number one things they looked for in guys that they were bringing in through the portal, through high school, wherever, was leadership. Because there were no leaders on this team last year. I think that was pretty apparent. Not only was there a lack of want to and effort, there was no Jameis Winston or Jared Verse or Jordan Travis that would go out and grab somebody by the face mask and say, you better get your butt in motion and get going. They just didn't give a crap because there was no leadership. And, when we spoke with Dylan Gibbons a few years ago on Spaces. And I remember him saying, I remember Josh asked him, like, what is Alex's leadership style? Like, how does he impact you? And he's like, to be honest with you, like when I first got here, it was pretty intense, but he trained us how to be leaders. And so Coach Atkins doesn't really, he leads us in a sense, but he doesn't really he's not like down our throats or, on our backs for leadership. It's us. Like we're the leaders and us older guys that Dylan was going into his second year at that time. We're the guys who are going to very much be the leaders now. And obviously you didn't have that last year. Again, it's hard to read into a lot of things. I'm not telling you that Florida State wins X number of games because Norvell focused on leadership. It didn't seem like he cared about that last year. It didn't seem like there was that emphasis on it last year. I think it's a good sign for Florida State that it is there this year.
Yeah, it's a cliche saying, but I think it's truly accurate. Whether it's, youth basketball or the NFL, the best teams are always player-led teams. You go back to if you've never watched it, guys, go to YouTube and type in FSU One Team, One Heartbeat. And it has a bunch of locker room scenes before and after games from Florida State's 2013 season. And you see the leadership that team had. Again, player-led teams. James Wilder, Tim Jernigan, Jameis, obviously. And we had no player-led leadership last year. And that was obvious. And honestly, I think if you could account for it, you're looking at you're probably making a bowl game if you had a group of leaders that were truly accountable. Instead of 2-10, 6-6 is still unacceptable at Florida State, but you probably could have got there if you had player-led leadership. And I think that had to be extremely frustrating to Mike Norvell, because he had always had player-led leadership the few years leading up to that. Jared Verse, obviously, Trey Benson, Jordan Travis, Jerrion Jones. Again, I'm naming off a bunch of transfers, which goes back to one of our earlier segments that you got to get better in high school. But at the same time, you could have the best motivational coach ever. Bill Belichick is probably the greatest coach of all time in NFL history, but is he without Tom Brady and his leadership abilities? Probably not. That's just the way it is. You need to find players who are leaders who can, pick up those talented players that just need a little motivation, that just need a little direction. And if you can find those players, they got to be good players. In the past, Florida State's had some bad teams where players have tried to be leaders, but they just weren't any good, quite frankly. I won't name any names, but I could think of a center from Jimbo's last team who tried to be that guy, but he, quite frankly, was terrible, and other players didn't respect it. But if you find good players who are also good leaders, you're going to have a really good team.
Yeah, you're right. It does have, and it does so much have to coincide with your good players. I thought about basketball just very quickly. And yeah, you look at the leaders on teams, whether it's Steph or LeBron or Michael or Kobe or Dwayne Wade and Shaq back at Miami, like whoever. Your leaders were guys that could get in other people's face and say like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Like Phil Jackson never had to coach anybody up, right? He either had Michael or Kobe doing that. Steve Kerr didn't have to coach people up because Steph will do that. All of LeBron's coaches, what was Spoelstra in Miami didn't have to coach people up because LeBron was doing that. Wade was doing that. They were in guys' faces saying like, hey man, step your game up. And so football's the same way. Do you think Bruce Arians was really, Bruce Arians is a great coach. He wasn't coaching guys up. Brady would absolutely
go watch The Last Dance if you haven't watched it, guys.
Yeah. Brady would absolutely
all you need to know.
Light people up if they weren't doing things right. And so, the leadership on the team just wasn't very good. And you're right. Yeah. You probably account for a couple more wins if you do have some kind of leadership on there. What I think is interesting there is I'll get right back to the video, but first I've got something exciting to share with you guys, something that's been a total game changer for me. Do you ever feel like life's hitting you with a low battery warning, like you're dragging through the day, the gym feels like a punishment, and your energy is just gone? I've been there. But then I found Emerald Medical, and let me tell you, their testosterone replacement therapy has me feeling like I just unlocked a secret cheat code for life. Real talk, I hit my mid-30s, suddenly I'm like, wait, where did my energy go? Turns out my testosterone levels were tanking harder than Wi-Fi during a storm. I started working with them over a year ago, and holy cow, it's like somebody flipped a switch back on. Energy's up, workouts are crushing it, and listen, I'm getting a boost in other areas, fellas, that you will enjoy as well. Look, I'm not out here trying to fight bears or bench press a Buick, though with Emerald Medical, I might actually consider it, but seriously, their team, total pros. My guy Chris over there is an FSU alum. They walked me through the whole process, blood test, personalized plans, the whole works. No sketchy vibes, no nonsense, just legit science-based therapy that's got me feeling like I'm 25 again. So if you're a guy who's feeling off a little bit, just not yourself, you're tired, check out Emerald Medical. They've got a free consultation for you if you mention the podcast. Yes, free, so you have nothing to lose. Maybe that meh feeling that you've been lugging around, but nothing else. Head on over to emerald-medical.com. I'll drop the link below. Again, mention Double Fries No Slaw. Not only will you get a free consultation, my buddy Chris over there will hook you up with a discount as well. All right, back to our video. Really how the guys will respond to Castellanos, and from all early reports, and you have to be very careful with this because the coaches aren't going to say anything negative, but from all early reports, it does seem like the team has responded fairly well to him, and he is a likable guy. You obviously still have in the back of your mind the way that things ended at Boston College not being super positive with Castellanos, but you'd hope that, he doesn't have to go out there and have a Heisman type season, but even if he just has an above average season, a good season like he did last year, I think his touchdown interception last year was like 18-5. Like it was pretty good. And so even if he can just give you a little bit of that success and give you a little bit of that promise against let's call it what it is, a pretty bad ACC, I think you're in a much better spot. Listen, I hate giving credit to our rivals, but did you see the way the Gators played for Lagway? Did you see the way that they played for a real leader? Did you see the way Miami in multiple games being down multiple scores? And I know it was great that they fell off at the end. That was awesome. But did you see the way they played for Cam Ward in some of those early season comebacks? Now, certainly they should have never been in some of those games. They should have never, the Cal game, the Virginia Tech game, the Louisville game, those shouldn't have been as close as they were. But you see the way they rallied and they played for that guy? Like, I hate giving them credit, but like, they play hard for their leaders, and I think that that's a big difference. And, I'm not telling you Florida State would have won as many games as either one of those teams or anything like that. But you're right. Just a little bit of leadership, a little bit of like grabbing a guy by the face mask and saying like, hey, we're going to get things going the right way. I think that's a big deal and something that was really, really missing last year because your coach, you've played sports, even though we didn't play at the highest level, you played sports, that eventually you're just going to tune out what your coach says, right? Like eventually he's said enough. He said the same things over and over and over again, and it just comes down a different way. But when your brothers tell you to do something, it's just different. And so I don't know, we'll see. Again, it makes me sick to give credit to those guys, but you look at and again, it's just so, all that said, it's hard to have true leaders have quarterbacks that aren't true leaders. Like that's really tough in my opinion, because those are the guys that you just have to look to. And look when Florida State's been successful, whether it's Charlie or whether it's, whoever, Weldon, Chris, even Ricks and stuff. Like back then, he wasn't super liked, but like a leader, Drew Weatherford, super, like guys like that can lead a team, whether they're elite or not. Ponder and EJ and Jameis and Jordan, like DeAndre Francois commanded the team, and had good leadership qualities. And so, I mean, it's really hard, I think, when your quarterback doesn't have that. It is something that, I'm not telling you that I think Castellanos is going to be some great leader or anything for this team, but I do think it's a massive upgrade over where we were.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, to your point, you talk about you don't even have to be the best player on the team, but man, when your best player, look, again, I'll reference 2013 again. When your very best players on each side of the ball, in my opinion, obviously Jameis, and then Timmy Jernigan, they were clearly the two biggest leaders of each side of the ball, and they just were not going to lose a game. It was not going to happen. And Thomas Castellanos does not have to be Jameis Winston. He just has to be a solid player who commands the respect of everybody in the room. It's no different than the business world. When you have someone who is a leader of a high performing department and they show up to a meeting with other leaders and they start talking, but that their department is very high performing, they're going to listen. It's just human nature. And I think that's where we need to get to. I don't know who it'll be on the defensive side of the ball, and we can only hope that it's Castellanos on the offensive side of the ball.
I know this might sound crazy, but I'm putting my money on Daryl Jackson on the defense side of the ball.
I think him returning and being so in his money year, and I know he's a very vocal player. If he can stay focused and play the way that he can play, I 100% agree.
Yeah, that's my early pick for kind of who we'll see take that over, and it would be a welcome sight for sure.